very much for coming.
Many thanks, Rasmus, for the kind introduction, and thanks for having me. It's very refreshing to have an honest talk with colleagues about this, because I've spent the last couple of months writing a grant application, and which is basically lying for a good cause, or pretending that I know what the research will look like in 5 years' time. And here I can be honest and say I have more questions than answers. And I'm very keen to ask you of your experience with code mixing across other languages, other periods, and perhaps to find a conceptual framework for that. Because we couldn't really agree among the three people putting in this grant application, whether this is actually a social act we are talking about, whether it's a form of pidgin, whether it's a pre-modern Denglish we are dealing with, or if we should use, probably not, the term of 19th century Protestant scholarship, which talked about Mönchskauderwelsch, so monastic lingo, but with a very derogatory undertone, somebody who just couldn't talk straight. I want to show you that this isn't a deficient language, but rather a very creative use of engaging with different levels, different registers, and creating something that is very bespoke, which is talking at a personal level across convents. So I start with a motto that a nun wrote into a miscellany, which is now in Wolfenbüttel, which used to be in Dernigerode, where she wrote, "Salutis ad preludium, sit artis nobis studium, wohlan, die Schrift forstan. Quosine stat in otio, claustralis heu devotio, nicht lesen is Öveldan." And I thought, so this artis studium could actually be translated as the study of the humanities. It could be the motto across our building here, about the importance of engaging with scripture on several levels, and to show that the nuns knew what they were talking about, I've brought two pairs of the oldest spectacles still surviving in the world, which were found under the floorboards of one of the German convents, namely Wienhausen, which is located near Celle, north of Hanover, and which is still standing today. So you can still inspect the floorboards and the choir stalls where the girls would sit here on the low bench. During the 8 years they were in convent school to learn Latin for the Studium Artis, until they became, after their profess, choir nuns, would sit in the main choir stool. And you can still get an insight into the importance of this enclosed space for the nuns. If you look at the wall painting above the door, which is here located, through which the nuns would walk out of the choir, you see the heavenly Jerusalem guarded by two cherubim. And if you look into the skyline of heavenly Jerusalem, you can see it has these Treppengiebel, the stepped gable. It has the little bell tower on top of the raised nuns choir. It has the lower east end of the church, and it's exactly Wienhausen. So the nuns are already in heavenly Jerusalem when they are singing and sitting in their choir stalls. This as a short preface to say enclosure for the nuns isn't being locked away, it's allowing them to develop their own code of communication through writing, through reading, through meditation, and opens up a space that is just for them. And they make ample use of that in producing a variety of texts. And since we have in this northern German monastic landscape the unique situation that we have institutions that were never dissolved, just shapeshifted from the Middle Ages through the early modern period to the modern times, nothing was ever thrown away. Some things were sold, so we end up with a few of the prayer books from meeting in the Bodleian Library and in Keble College, but there was no dissolution of the monasteries, and there was no secularization. I did a little promotional video for the book about the nuns in Godstow Abbey. If you compare that with Wienhausen, you see what is lost in England. And part of it you can really reconstruct by looking at the text of their writing. And the particularly rich source on which I want to concentrate today are the letters from Kloster Lüne, which were collected by the nuns during the Reformation period as pieces of evidence that they always had been independent, both spiritually and economically. So the Duke of Braunschweig-Lüneburg had no legal or moral right to a hostile takeover, and they were successful with this. So that ensured the survival of these convents. And I'm going to introduce them to you as in a medieval schoolroom where you would go through the categories quis, quid ubi, quibus auxiliis, cur, quo modo, quando. So these 1,800 letters are written and received by the nuns. The nuns came from the patrician families of Lüneburg. Lüneburg, the richest Hanseatic town, so of the trade area around the North and Baltic Sea because of the salt. Underneath the city, there are still the salt stocks, and the nuns got as their dowry when entering the convent a quarter of a salt pan or an eighth, so shares in this trade business. And these 1,800 letters cover a vast area of topics. They talk about theology. They do a lot of lobbying. So it's not just the nuns of Lüne who are resisting the Duke. It's a coordinated effort with the neighboring convents. And they do this to ensure their independence and the memoria, that what they have created survives the period. How is this done? And this is done in three different styles of language writing. And that is, they write in Latin, pure Latin, to the bishop and so on. They even sometimes write in verse, because part of their prose composition they had to do when learning Latin in school was to versify things like the spiritual significance of wine. So when they are sending a especially good bottle of wine to their confessor as a gift for Whitsun, they write an accompanying letter why it's not just a good drink, but also very meaningful. So that's Latin. Then they write in pure Low German, the language of their upbringing before entering the convent, aged 5 to 7. So their mother tongue, but also the language of all of the Hanseatic trade, because in Low German you could sign a treaty in Newcastle or in Bergen or in Novgorod, and it would all be bound by the same legal framework. And this, so the linguistic area of Low German is where the low part of the Germany is, towards the north, towards the Low Countries, north of the so-called Benrather Linie. Lüneburg is here in the North Low Saxon area, but as I said, reaching out from there. So not a backwater language, which is sometimes hard for Germans to understand, because Plattdeutsch in the modern times has sunk in prestige and has just become a local dialect. But this isn't local. This is the pre-runner of EU English that they are writing. So they're writing their business letters in Low German. They also write their letters of advice, of consolation, of negotiation to their families. So they kept in strong exchange with their sisters, with their parents, with their nephews and nieces. From Meeding, I have the case of 3 sisters in Meeding and 1 sister married to the town mayor, and they exchanged letters, and also the nuns in Meeding translated their Latin prayer books into Low German for their secular sister. And then you have what I want to talk about, and I find the most fascinating, and that is this code mixing, code switching language that takes elements from Latin and elements from Low German. And that is the language that is used particularly for the exchange between the convents. So if you look at the frontispiece of the cookbooks, you'll see the current abbesses, or the abbesses of 10 years ago. It's a while that we published it, so some of them have got successors. And they still form the Generalkonvent der Äbtissin. It's like the heads of houses in Oxford regularly meeting. So they still do lobby work together. They just appointed a new archivist for all of the convents, so that was a bit of negotiation practice, which key skills an archivist should bring along. So their predecessors are linked by an intense exchange of letters. That's why we called our edition of the first letter book Die Netzwerke der Nonnen, the networks of the nuns. So this fat volume you see there is the edition of Handschrift 15, the first letter book, which looks a little bit like a over-dimensioned toast loaf. And it was the hardest to crack, or at least that we hope, because this was put together in a fairly haphazard fashion by 22 different nuns, each of them just grabbing a pile of loose papers, a bit like before we were moving over from Wellington Square to here, and suddenly we're told we had to put all lecture notes of old conference papers, all paid or unpaid bills, into a form that would be transportable by the transport. So the nuns started frantically copying all this material to prove their existence when the Duke was at the Anteportas. And so we have gatherings where a nun started writing in a gathering of 4 leaves, and then found she had just half a page to add. So she just wrapped another paper around it, continued writing at the end, then continued writing at the front because there was an empty space, and then bound it together with another gathering. So you really need a digital edition to reconstruct the sequence of letters. You can't just print as it comes. The other 2 letter books, you can see they have a much more traditional format, where then professionally started. So one is a survey of all the outgoing letters, which is the largest number, and that was done at a time then when a proper archiving system was set up. And manuscript 31, which is the one we are currently editing, has all the incoming letters for that period. And that also an attempt of dating more consistently. Because what we don't have are the original letters, with very few exceptions. So I've put here so that you see how it was folded, a so-called Ganzstück. So you would have a large sheet of paper, you would write on one side, you would continue writing on the back side until you just had enough space left to put the address on it, fold it. They do letter locking workshops in the Bodleian, which is fascinating. You can sometimes date things by the way in which they are folded up. But so these letters being single tended to get lost, while we have these copies of, and you can here again see the letter book 2 and 3 are much more systematic than the first one. All right, let's look at a concrete example of how the nuns are writing. This is a letter from one Gertrud von Eelse to another Gertrud von Eelse. We don't know how exactly they were cousins, but it's typical that these were the ruling families from Lüneburg who sent their daughters both to Lüne and to Meding. And the letters always start completely in Latin, because these are you might have learned in primary school how to start a letter off. So these are the formulas the nuns have learned. And we have actually sometimes pages of just these formulas, how to greet each other, because you tweak the greeting to fit the liturgical time. So here it's in hoc vernali tempore pascalis jucunditatis. So it's the time of Paschal joy in which Christ has opened up the wine cellars of his sweetness, vinarium sue suavitatis. So always the liturgical time is linked with something enjoyable as a spiritual gift, because the nuns had to take the oath of poverty, so they can't exchange really valuable gifts, but they can send each other these spiritual greetings. And then it gets mixed. The N is because the letter is copied from the draft letter, where you wouldn't write out the name of your addressee, and you would keep it as a model, and then so some things are not specified. Precordialissima N. Ik do caritate vestre fründliken te wetende, dat ik, permittente divina bonitatis Dei, binnen bona suspitate. Et ipsum affectere ik von ju, und van user leven amitem Lucia van Eelsen te wetende, tempore longevo, secundum plene placitum divino. You can already see there are certain set Latin phrases, like here, divina bonitate Dei, so as you would still say in German, so Gott will und wir leben, from the formula, the subclausa Jacobi, that are dropped into the syntax. Carlo, why don't you come to the front? It's much easier to see. There's spaces next to here. Yeah, I apologize. My font size tends to decrease with ongoing lectures. Yeah. And then you see certain loan words that are taken from Latin and put into German. So amitem is from Latin amita, which is a female relative, so auntie or cousin. And it retains actually the Latin ending, but has the weakened, unstressed syllable of the logan. And then affectere ik is from Latin affectare, but with a Low German ending. And these are in abundance. And most of these ad hoc, spontaneous formations based on Latin but with Low German endings aren't in any dictionary. So the Middle Low German dictionary just went online in January. This will allow us now for the second volume to link up with the Low German dictionary, but also to feed into the update of the dictionary or these words that the nuns coin on the go, I would say. Ceterum preamantissime amita regratio vestre innate caritate pro multis et innumeris beneficies, sündigen vor de groten Läfmördigkeit, die je mir lässt bewieseden, cum illis pulcherimis foliis de auratis, in civus manifestius declamastis fidele et benevolum corvestrum cum caritate plenum. Dat is mir noch nicht vergeten. Ik moet je dus danken toto temporo vitae mee. Und ik kan je dus ook niet vergeten kwam dio vixero. So as soon as there is, it gets more emotional in the language of intimacy, as Koch Österreicher called as a Sprache der Nähe versus Sprache der Distanz. So Low German clearly is the language of closeness. So if she wants to stress that she won't forget it, she is using this. Interestingly enough, just as an aside, the form of address from one Gertrud to another Gertrud, clearly blood relatives, is the formal form of Irzen, so the second person plural, which was actually enforced by the bishop. We have a visitation charter from Wienhausen, so the convent I showed first with a nuns choir, where he criticizes that people were addressing each other just with first names without title, and with a second person with tibisare. And they shouldn't do it non lai kali more senominent, but in the Latin way, as Mater Gertrud vel soror Adelheidis and nexe in futurum tibisent. So they shouldn't use the informal second person singular in future. And so the nuns would write to their sisters or brothers that were in Lüneburg in the second person singular, but would use the second person plural as a form of respect to the status of the brides of Christ, who are obviously of nobility and should be addressed with a plural. So she can't enough express her joy. Nam quotiens ea intueo oculis corporeis, totiens mirum et inauditum gaudium experior interius. Und davon wird mein Hertiken Saepius rekreiert. Hertiken, the little heart, can, like the German, High German, chen ending. And we have lots of these diminutive forms in Low German. A disproportionately high number of diminutive forms which seem to go with this language of intimacy. Recreate is another of these loan words from Latin, recreare. Quite interestingly enough, a lot of the loan words that the nuns are using, and quite often it seems to be a spontaneous formation, not repeated a lot, are also words that made it into English via French from Latin. So I find that sometimes an English audience finds this Latin Low German mix easier than standard modern German actually to understand. Yeah. So davon wird mein Hertiken Saepius rekreiert. Wente wann ich aliqua molestia vexert bin, ex multus occupationibus. I think we can all sympathize with that. To be vexed by many occupations. Und denn illos principes gloriosus ansehe, so latet mi dunken, wie sie mi pondus totius meroris statem allevieren. So they alleviate immediately my sorrow. And so she is thanking for these gilded leaves. And what this must mean are these little devotional images quite cheaply produced, often even printed and just hand-colored with wash. So not materially precious, but precious because of the religious content and the intention behind it. And these Anais is working on the patron saints of Wienhausen and Meding. And I guess these glorious princes must refer to St. Maurice and his soldiers, because they were the patron saints of Meding, so the patron saints of one of the Gertrudes. The statue of St. Maurice is still in Meding. The prayer books with St. Maurice are all over the world because they were sold in the 18th century as überflüssige, kostbare Gegenstände, superfluous, precious objects by the abbess. Fortunately, because 10 years later the whole convent burnt down. It's the only of the convents that isn't any longer medieval. So we have St. Maurice here around the corner in the Bodleian Library and also in Keble College. All right, so she thanks for sending her these. Und davon wird juveleve jo mehr und mehr augmentiert in corde meo. Und konnte ich ju versavice, woran et to willen wesen, dat wollte ich ex toto corde gerne don. Et nil opto aut desidero men allene, dat ich ju illam caritatem gründlichen opere mochte exhiberen, die ich cum stile cortidio exprimere, quia secundum dictum beati Gregorii, probatio dilectionis, exhibitio est operis. So obviously quotations from church fathers like Gregory the Great are in Latin. Tam insufficientem meam willig admitteren summo largitori omnium gratiarum, aquo omne datum optimum et omne donum perfectum descendit, demote hünc intime caritatis affectum verfüllen und ium causa mei geben, tot et tanta gratiarum munera, quanto celem continet gaudia, et alva profet flores et gramina. So this is obviously also a kind of set piece she had learned in convent school to express an abundance of something. This flipping over into verse can happen both in Latin and in German, but in slightly different style. So if it goes into verse in German, it normally is in the form of song. So we have secular love songs inserted, but also religious Leisen, one verse hymns that end with Kyrie eleison into these letters. This part of the letter wraps up in Latin, and then it goes over to business, and then again comes more German from Mi carissima. Ich sende ju ad presens dat Geld vor dat paar Handschen, da reverenda Dompna Vestra, veneranda Dompne Nostre, lässt wede zu Hilfe kam. Und wir sind humiliter Begehrende, dat je uns läflichen exkusieren ihre Werdigkeit, dat wir da so lange meditariert haben. They had tarried so long with payment for the gloves. Gloves were the usual gifts for visiting bishops. And I was delighted to learn that when the inauguration of the new mayor of Oxford is, they have to hand over still a pair of gloves to the Bishop of Oxford. So it seems to be still the case. And the convents were specialized in certain types of textile production. So they would, Ebsdorf would send pearls to others, and Meding would do the glove production for several different convents. So this again, these damned innumeris occupationibus had prevented dat we des nene mate hebben konden ju aliquate schrievende. For so dorske we us des nis presumeren dat we in the Sylven hätten schrieben. So she apologizes for the delay in many words. And then at the end of practically every letter, there are little gifts from one chef to the other. So all these convents also specialized in particular goodies. Although it's still debated among our project team what these exactly, these pisciculi conditi are that are sent. So candied, a little fish, whether this is fish pickled in honey to preserve it, or whether it's gingerbread in fish form. We know that the convents produced gingerbread. A colleague here, Edmund Wareham, who worked for the project at the result, has looked at the expenses forms for a convent, a Cistercian convent, Lichten, in Günterstal, the Günterstal nuns near Freiburg, and they would send gingerbread to all patrons, and you could be a gold star patron, then you got gingerbread in unicorn form with gilded horn, or if you were just a normal sponsor, you just got a heart shape with a little bit of Zuckerguss. For the servants of the convent, they just got little round stamped gingerbread. So we aren't quite sure, but it seems to be something delicious that is sent over. Oxende vi pisciculus conditus und bitten nimium obnixe, dat je die Willen don reverendre domne vestre ex parte nostra. Das schalse sig mede confortert. Diot laudem. Und weil venerabilis caritas sua jü und unser Lütgen am Mieten Lucia von Elsen wat von geven. Dat will ich, eius benevolentie, ganz licken admittieren. Wenn ich habe dat se pissime und jüven Schriften verstaan, dat se jü materne et pie for is in omnibus. And so always at the end, there are greetings to other relatives in the convent of the women. That is. And then nil plus. That's enough. That's then the final sign off links back to the opening formula, placing it again into the time and place of the church here. I've spoken quite a while. Before I come to my conclusion, I thought I should wake you up and introduce a little bit of a different genre of code mixing by encouraging you to join a song that the nuns in Wienhausen noted down. And we know from the diary of a nun in Heiligkreuz near Braunschweig that songs like that would be improvised during harvest time or during times when communal tasks needed to be done. And this shows another playful way of mixing these languages. And in the manuscript of the Wienhäuser Liederbuch, you have a short, the entrance of bis above certain passages, meaning twice, which would probably mean that one nun would sing it and then everybody would repeat the refrain. So whatever I've highlighted in yellow, you'll just repeat after me. And there are 4 verses to it, and I'm sure in verse 4 you'll all be able to sing along. Azellos in der Mola, na Mola von sim Herrn, Präsumpserat in Skola, wollt sin Lexje lern. Magister Bonadies, der Esel sprach mit Lewe, Pax inter vos et quies, ich lerde gerne Breve. Everybody. Pax inter vos et quies, ich lerde gerne Breve. Komm, Esel ist dumm, sprich Latin, du bist nicht dumm. Vis saccus oblivissi, Ach, gut gemach, woll ich wünschen all den Dach. Si potem assipissi, si possem adipissi. Si sirem alphabetum von Stund wollt ich studieren, jus leges et decretum, danach mocht ich plädieren. Pro magna prebenda, ich to Chore singe, dum clamo, vox est ia, de Sack schall mich nicht bringen. Everybody. Dum clamo, vox est ia, de Sack schall mich nicht bringen. Lehre sehr, Esele sehr, du wärst doch wohl ein groter Herr. Mux pot is doctrinari, Sing, Esel kling, dat ward noch gut alle Ding. Si vis presbyterari, Si essem tambeatus, dat ich ein Priester wurde, hic esset Deo gratus, de mine misse horde, de in de Predikarem, grot afflat woldig gäven, ut saccus non portarem, so woldig sachte läven, ut saccus non portarem, so woldig sachte leben. Do, du, de mal so, gatu chore, singe ho, nam vox est tibi bona, nam vox est tibi boni. Ja, da hat ich gar, wenn ich over missen sta, portantur mihidona. Commissam, dum cantavit, du kam der Esel driever, hunk fuste, verberavit, wo wusste nun in Schriever, cur decipis, sic plebis, woher, Lob in de Molen, saccus portare debis, beide Schleppen und de Sohlen, saccus portare debis, beide Schleppen und de Sohlen. Ach, hätt ich doch, Säcke tragen wente noch, tunk esset mis wave. And now, Moral von der Geschichte. Vorwahr, werdet dem Swar, der Schalopp sinen olden Jahr, pundus portare grave. So, learn Latin early or study linguistics, then you don't have to carry when you're old all these bags. All right. To sum up, what is now the nuns' code of communication? Why do they use code mixing? Is it a social act? And I thought I would just give a few different forms of scale. So, as I had mentioned, I've operated with the concept of Koch-Österreicher, of language, of intimacy versus, or rather on the scale, a language of distance. But I would argue a similar scale can be applied to Latin as a language of learning and religion, vernacular as a language of familiarity, of business, and how for each addressee it can be placed on this scale. The same applies to verse and prose. So language can be augmented by rhetorical element. It can go over into something rhymed. I haven't shown you that many examples except for the last song, but in the last song you could see how the switch between the lines plays also with the language set. There is also a scale between a letter that is just drafted, quickly sent off sketch, and something that is carefully referencing a previous. And then I would say all of these letters have to be considered within the enclosed space of the convent. So the letters are their face. They don't meet with the outside world. They don't even meet with others of the same order. So through the letters, they operate between performance of life and meditation. Intimacy and distance I had mentioned. Literacy and orality, I wanted to read out this one letter to you to show how much of everyday language that you nearly can hear them talking. And I think it's not just imagination, because the only other example we have of a large corpus of mixed language texts from Germany in that period, Luther's Tischreden, so the table talks he gave, and which were noted down by two of his students. And he was famous enough at that point that they tried to verbatim catch what he was saying. And we can see that this must have been really the code of communication also between other religious people, between public and private writing, between business and religion. All right, so far from me, now over to you. I asked you, what is this?
Thank you very much. It's the first time I have sung at a GLS, but I haven't been here for this happens all the time. You told me. As per usual, we first give the